Welcome back to the Rusty Garage. Today we're going to be going over a DIY valve lapping method that you can do at home, plus a simple DIY valve grinding setup and valve polishing process so you can get your valve sealing properly again without paying a machine shop. If you find this content helpful while you're working on your own project car, smash that like button and subscribe for more DIY engine repair videos. The first thing we need to do is clean and polish these valves. You can see this one is already nice and clean and polished, and this one is still black with carbon buildup. I'll walk you through exactly how I clean and prep these. I keep everything in order with this piece of cardboard. I've got everything labeled for cylinder 1, 2, 3, and 4, with intake and exhaust marked so every valve goes back into the exact hole it came out of. I've also got the rockers laid out in order the same way. Now I'll take the first valve and chuck it up in a drill. You don't have to crank it super tight, just enough so it won't slip. And I'll give it a quick once over with the wire wheel on the bench grinder. You can see that after the wire wheel it already cleans up pretty well and most of the carbon is gone. Then I'll go through a series of sandpaper grits, starting with 220, lightly oiled. You could also use a bit of water as lubricant. Once that's smoothed out, I move up to 320, again lightly oiled. Then I step up to 400, and from there I move to 800. Each step just makes the surface a little smoother and removes the deeper scratches from the previous grit. After 800, you can keep going up through 2000 or even 4000 grit if you want a mirror finish, but for this job it's not really necessary. I'll finish with a metal polishing compound. I'm using Brasco metal polish here, which you can grab at most local hardware stores. I apply a little to the valve and just spin it in the drill. That gives you a nice, smooth, polished valve that's ready to be seated. Before lapping, I've already cleaned up the deck and mating surface of the head and checked it for warpage. Everything measured under the max spec, so we're good to go. Now I'm going to prep the valve seats. I take a black Sharpie and mark all the way around each valve seat. It doesn't have to be pretty, just a solid ring of black. The reason for this is simple. Once we lap the valve, the Sharpie mark will show exactly how much of the valve face is seating on that seat. That tells us if our contact area is even and consistent, and we can also measure the contact area with calipers. Once again, notice the cardboard. I've got number 1, 2, 3, and 4 cylinders labeled. Intake valves on one side, exhaust valves on the other. This keeps every valve matched to the guide and seat it came from. It's important so you don't mix the parts and create sealing issues. Now we can start lapping. I'm going to apply some valve grinding compound to the valve. You don't need a ton, but you do want a thin, even ring all the way around the valve face. If you get a little too much, it's not a big deal. You can wipe off the excess. Next, I put a little oil in the valve guide to lubricate it. Then I drop the valve into the guide like normal. For the lapping setup, I slip a short piece of rubber hose over the end of the valve stem. Then I slide a 5/16 rod or similar into the other end of that hose. That rod goes into the drill chuck, and when I spin the drill, it turns the valve through the hose and grinds the compound between the valve and seat. I already lapped the first valve off camera while I figured out how to film this, but you'll see the same process here. After a short lapping session, pull the valve out and look at the face. You'll see a shiny ring, and on the seat you'll see where the compound has cut through the Sharpie. That tiny band is your contact area. That's how much of the valve is actually seating. We want that band to be even all the way around and consistent from valve to valve. If the contact area looks uneven or too wide on one side, you know you need a little more work there. Once the contact looks good, I do a quick leak test. I install the valve back in the seat and apply some downward pressure with a screwdriver to simulate the spring pressure, then spray soapy water all around the valve and seat area. With a little air pressure applied from the port side, I watch for bubbles. In this first test, you can see bubbles coming up on one side. That means it's still leaking and not fully seated. If I see bubbles like that, I'll go back and lap the valve a little more with the same process. Add a little bit more compound, spin it with the drill and hose, apply some downward pressure with my finger while it spins, and then clean it and recheck the contact. Then I repeat the soapy water test, and when the seal is correct, you won't see any bubbles from that seat. Here you can see, after the second round of lapping, the contact band on the valve and seat looks even, and when I spray soapy water and apply air, there are no bubbles coming from the seat. That tells me that this valve is now sealing properly. That's exactly what we're going for on each valve before we move on to reassembly. Now I can reinstall the valves and springs, and I'm using a homemade valve spring compressor here. And if you want to watch the build videos, click the card in the corner. You can see I've already got the intake valves in, and I'm working through the exhaust valves now. I've also installed new valve stem seals. So to use my homemade valve spring compressor, I'm just snugging the tool down onto the spring, centering it as best as I can, and then start tightening to compress the spring. Once the spring is compressed, I'll insert the valve and you'll be able to see the valve stem sticking up through the retainer. Now I can install the keepers. I like to use a magnetic screwdriver to hold the first keeper, then carefully set it into the groove on the valve stem. With a second screwdriver, I help guide it into place and make sure it's fully seated. Then I'll just rotate the valve and repeat the process for the second keeper. Once both keepers are in their grooves, I double check visually that they're fully seated all the way around and push on them with the screwdriver. After both keepers are in, I slowly back off the spring compressor, alternating from side to side so it comes up evenly. Once it's loose, I can just lift the tool off and slide it over to the next valve in that cylinder and repeat the same process. The very last step here is to take a brass punch and give the top of the retainer a few light taps with a hammer. That helps make sure the keepers are fully seated in the groove and nothing is hung up. Work your way through each valve like this until all of them are installed and fully seated. And if this DIY valve lapping and valve grinding walkthrough helped you out, let me know in the comments what engine you're working on. Smash that like button and subscribe if you want more DIY engine rebuild videos. And as always, thanks for watching and good luck with your build.